Welcome to part 2 of our forestry calculations here. Well, notice what I've done is I've highlighted the species in alternating colors just to make the groupings of these trees easier to see when I'm entering formulas. Alright, I want to know how many total trees I've surveyed. So in this cell here I'm going to count them. So the name of our formula will just be count. So equal count is the name of the function. Now I can count any of these numerical columns, so I'll just count in the basal column for convenience. And that's how many trees we surveyed. It's 84. What about D bar? D bar is the mean point to plant distance, and it's just the average of all of those distances that we surveyed in the field. So if we go back to our data here, the formula will be equals average, and I want the average of all of these distances for all of my trees. So that is D bar. So the average point to plant distance happens to be 2 meters. Rounded off, of course. Total density, that formula is 10,000 over D bar squared. Now the 10,000 comes from the fact that there are 10,000 square meters in a hectare, and we are squaring the D bar parameter here because we're concerning ourselves with a square area, right? So this will actually give us an estimation as to how many trees there are total in a hectare according to our survey. So let's go back and enter the formula. Equals 10,000 divided by D bar, which is this cell here. Notice that I've renamed the cell D bar, and I'm going to square it. So according to our survey, there are about 2,500 trees per hectare in the Westside Nature Preserve. So again, I want to go back and show you how I renamed these cells here. You can rename a cell anything you want. By default, they're named in accordance with the column versus row. So if we go to, say, any cell here, say F2, notice the name of the cell here in this name box is F2. But what if I wanted to name my number of trees total something else, like tree tote? Well, I highlight the cell, I go up to my name box, and I just simply type in tree tote. What about D bar? I could do the same thing with that cell. It's named D bar. Total density is just named TD. Now the reason why I've customized those cell names, it just makes entering formulas later on a little bit easier, so I don't have to keep going back and referencing cells. Alright, so what about our forestry formulas? We want relative density, absolute density, and coverage of all of these species individually. So let's do relative density first. So that is the number of a particular species over the total number of trees that we surveyed. So if we go back, so we're working with beech right now. So we want relative density, we'll just call it RD. So it's the total number of beech trees over the total number of trees that we surveyed. So let's put the formula in that cell right there. So it's going to be equal to count. So I'm going to count how many beech trees I have. I could physically count them, or I could just use our handy count function. Divided by total number of trees, or tree tote, right? Notice once I start typing it in, Excel tries to make a guess. And there it is, tree tote. Relative density of beech. Alright. What's our next forestry formula? Absolute density, which is simply relative density that we just calculated times the total density. So let's go back. So absolute density, we'll just name it AD. So our formula will go in the cell right next to it. So it will be relative density, which we just calculated, so equals this cell here, times the total density, which we have calculated up here, and the name of that cell is just TD. So what this value really means is that we expect to see about 271 beech trees per hectare, according to our survey information here. Finally, we want coverage based on the cross-sectional area of a trunk, or known as basal area. So it's going to be the average of all of those basal areas for beech multiplied by absolute density of beech. So let's go back. Let's just call the name of this C for coverage here. So a formula is going to be, if we look at that again, so it's going to be the average of all of those basal averages, average all of these values here. So it will, the formula will be equals average. Double click. I'm going to average all these basal values here together for beech, and I'm going to multiply that by the absolute density, which we just calculated. So I'll just reference the cell like that by left-clicking it, and there you go.